Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
So I thank the organizers for inviting me here. This is going to be perhaps a little oddball talk in this conference, but it's quite related to many of the things which I've heard this morning. And perhaps I can understand how they are used in machine learning. I'm told they are. So I'm going to talk about averaging process on the space of positive definite matrices. So my matrices are n cross n complex matrices. Okay, so on the left hand side here I have positive numbers, here I have positive definite matrices, and I try to imitate some things which we can do here in this setting. So you have two positive numbers a, b, positive definite matrices a and b. The arithmetic mean is a plus b over 2 as it is here. If you want to do the harmonic mean, you can do exactly the same thing. Interesting things begin to happen when you come to the geometric mean. So if I take the square root of AB, it does not make sense in the case of matrices because the product of two Hermitian matrices is Hermitian if and only if A and B commute. So if I have two positive definite matrices and AB not even Hermitian, let alone positive definite, so the square root does not make any sense. So I have this curiosity to begin with, how do you define a good geometric mean of positive definite matrices? So before that I should tell you what do I expect a mean to be. So again here you have numbers and here you have positive definite matrices, so mean of AB and mean of AB. So a mean should be symmetric. The mean of AB should be the same as mean of BA, so it is here. Then for numbers, I expect the mean to lie in between the minimum and the maximum of two numbers. Now here you already have problem. If I have two positive definite matrices, there is no minimum or maximum necessarily. So let me put this condition, if A is less than or equal to B. By that I mean B minus A is positive semi-definite. So please remember this order is going to be important. We say A is less than or equal to B if and only if B minus A is positive semi-definite. So I demand that if A is less than or equal to B in this order, then their mean should be in between A and B. Next property for means of numbers, if I multiply both A and B by a positive number alpha, then the mean of the two numbers should also get multiplied by alpha. So what is the equivalent condition for matrices? I take A and B and apply to both this transformation x star AX. So that's the equivalent of multiplying by a positive number. So if A is positive semi-definite, then x star AX is also positive semi-definite for any x. So I put this condition, the mean of x star AX and x star BX should be equal to the mean of AB conjugated again on the left by x star, on the right by x. This has a natural interpretation in electrical engineering literature. They call it the transformer equation. For mathematicians, this is congruence invariance. So this transformation A going to x star AX is called a congruence. Then a mean should have an important property, monotonicity. So if I increase one of the arguments, then the mean should also go up. So I put the same condition here. If A is less than or equal to A prime, then the mean of AB should be less than or equal to mean of A prime B. You could put other conditions depending on your problem. I want it to be continuous, for example, and so on. So these are the minimum conditions that a mean of matrices, of positive definite matrices, should satisfy. So just for historical interest, the Greeks already studied 11 different means. The three arithmetic, harmonic, geometric are the most famous ones. There are others, and now there are many which arise in different problems. So if I'm going to define a geometric mean of matrices, as an analyst, I may expect this property, that it should be smaller than the arithmetic mean and bigger than the harmonic mean. The next condition comes from elasticity, that if you take the inverse of your matrices A and B, then the geometric mean should be the inverse of the geometric mean of A and B. Determinant should have certain properties, so we'll see as we go along. Now I should warn you about some of the subtleties of this subject. So as I said, we say A is bigger than B if A minus B is positive definite. Now one would expect that if A is bigger than B, then the square of A should be bigger than the square of B. And unfortunately that turns out to be false. So here is an example. Take A to be the 2 by 2 matrix 3 1 1 1, B to be 2 1 1 1, then A minus B, sorry there is a typo here, A minus B is 1 0 0 0, but that matrix is positive semi-definite. If you take A square, that's 10 4 4 2, B square is 5 3 3 2, so A square minus B square is 5 1 1 0, whose determinant is negative. So A is bigger than B, but A square is not bigger than B square. So that makes this theory very interesting. So what are monotone functions with respect to this order? So there is a theory of operator monotone functions due to Loevner. Ravi mentioned my book. Chapter 5 of that book discusses this problem in detail. So one important fact is that if A is bigger than B, then the square root of A is bigger than the square root of B, or any tth power where t is between 0 and 1, that preserves order. Log of A is bigger than log of B, but the exponential is not. So these are some important facts. In fact, Loevner characterized all functions which are monotone in this sense. I can tell you that later. So please remember this fact that the square root is monotone. I'll use that. So if I cannot write square root of AB, I should try to imagine other ways of writing square root of AB which would lift two matrices. So here are two possibilities. I take exponential of log A plus log B over 2. So if these were numbers, you get square root of AB. Or I can take A to the power t plus B to the power t, divide that by 2, then the whole thing to the power 1 upon t, and then take limit as t goes to 0. Then again you will get square root of AB. So now this makes sense for matrices. I take exponential of log A plus log B over 2. Earlier my problem was square root of AB does not make sense. Now this makes very good sense. But because of what I told you, exponential is not monotone. The tth power for t bigger than 1 is not monotone. So this, though reduces to square root of AB, does not have the right properties. So people tried all kinds of things. So none of them worked. So some very imaginative physicists came up with the solution. So here is the definition to Pusch and Voronovich. So this is my notation. A sharp B is going to denote the geometric mean of A and B. So the first expression, you look at A to the power minus 1/2, B A to the power minus 1/2. Now that's a positive definite matrix. Raise this whole thing to the power 1/2 and then again multiply on the left and on the right by A to the power 1/2. So that's the definition due to Pusch and Voronovich. Now you would say it does not seem to be symmetric in A and B, but as it turns out it is. That's something quite miraculous. If A and B commute, then you can lift things around and you will see it just reduces to square root of A times square root of B. At the same time, and maybe a little earlier, electrical engineers, they came up with another definition. You look at this Riccati equation, x A inverse x is equal to B. Once again, if these were numbers or commuting matrices, then this will just become x square is equal to AB. The solution would be square root of AB. So one can see that this equation has a unique positive definite solution. And it turns out that that solution is just this, what I wrote here. So that's another way of looking at the geometric mean. Then mathematicians found another third characterization which is also very interesting. You make up a 2 by 2 block matrix, put A and B on the diagonal and X on the off diagonal where X is Hermitian, and demand that this matrix be positive definite. Then one can show among all such X there is a maximum with respect to the order I told you about, and call that the geometric mean. So once again, look at the situation when these were numbers. What's the condition for this matrix to be positive definite? It's just that the determinant should be positive. So that is just AB should be bigger than X square, and the maximum of such X is exactly square root of AB. So, but the miracle is that all these three things lead to the same object. So you can obtain different things from these. So for example, from the first one, it's very clear that the determinant of the geometric mean of A and B is the geometric mean of the determinants. From that expression you can see very easily. From the second one you can see that the geometric mean of A inverse B inverse is the inverse of the geometric mean of AB. And this is a maximal characterization, so it's useful in proving inequalities. So many things in physics like concavity of entropy and other things have been derived using this idea. Now I want to convince you that this formula, which looks very strange, is actually quite natural, and in fact the only possibility if you want, yes, if you want certain properties to hold. So I told you we want our mean to be invariant under congruences. That is, if I take the transformation X star AX, that should not change the mean. So look at the pair AB, apply the congruence by A to the power minus 1/2. Then this pair becomes identity A minus 1/2 B A minus 1/2. Now when one of the matrices is identity, then you will be silly to do anything else than just taking the square root of this. So what's the mean of identity and something? It should just be the square root of that something. So the geometric mean of these two has to be the square root of A to the power minus 1/2 B A to the power minus 1/2. So I did this congruence, now I undo that. So then the geometric mean of AB has to be this expression due to Push and Voronovich, which you see in front of you. So if you want a congruence invariant mean, then this is the only possibility. So there's nothing mysterious about that formula. Okay, now for example, as I said, you may ask that this geometric mean should be in between A plus B over 2, the arithmetic mean, and the harmonic mean, which is A inverse plus B inverse over 2 whole thing inverse. That turns out to be right. So it has all the nice properties, and this was done in the 70s, and it has been very useful. Since then there was a problem that how to define a good or right geometric mean of 3 or more positive definite matrices. Now all the procedures which I showed you, there is no natural way of going beyond 2 matrices. The first was this formula, which is already very complicated. Second was this equation XA inverse X is equal to B. Third was that Ando's 2 by 2 matrix. None of them readily goes over to 3 matrices. So recently, that's in the last 5 or 6 years, there has been progress on this because a connection with differential geometry has been exploited. So I want to explain that. So here is a picture. So these are least square problems, but in a little different metric. So this should be of interest to at least some people here. So in this picture, on the left hand side I have n by n Hermitian matrices, and on the right I have n cross n positive definite matrices. So when I say positive, I mean positive definite. So this is a vector space. Hermitian matrices are a real vector space, and positive matrices is a cone. So that's what this picture is supposed to indicate. So people have been talking of the Frobenius. So please excuse me, for a functional analyst, 2 means the Frobenius norm because that's the Euclidean norm. So it's not your spectral or operator norm. So on Hermitian matrices, you have this inner product of AB, which is trace AB, and the corresponding norm, that's the Frobenius norm, which is the square root of trace A square. So there is an exponential map from Hermitian matrices onto positive definite matrices. So there is a natural way of generating a metric here. Just as you will do on the circle or on the sphere, you have exponential from the plane onto the sphere. So that gives rise to a Riemannian metric on the space of positive definite matrices, which is written in front of you. Delta 2, that's the Riemannian distance between two positive definite matrices A and B, is the norm of log of A to the power minus 1/2 B A to the power minus 1/2. In terms of eigenvalues, so what is this Frobenius norm? You can write it as, so take the log of the eigenvalues of A inverse B, square them up, take the summation and then take the square root. So summation log square eigenvalues of A inverse B 1/2. So it turns out that this is a metric on the space of positive definite matrices, and it's the natural Riemannian metric. So it's a usual first course in differential geometry, except you have to do it in this setup. So it's a metric. Now it turns out, and you can check this very easily, this metric is invariant under congruence transformations. So if I take x star AX, x star BX, the distance between them is the same thing as the distance between A and B for all invertible matrices X. So in particular, the distance between A and B is the same thing as the distance between identity and A minus 1/2 B A minus 1/2. Then this metric is invariant under inversions. That's because of the log. You see, log of 1 upon x is minus log of x, and then if you square, and it will not change anything. So the distance between A inverse B inverse is the same thing as the distance between A and B. So these are some important properties. Now this is one of the fundamental properties of this metric. It's called the exponential metric increasing property. So H and K are two Hermitian matrices. I take their exponentials, they become positive definite matrices. It turns out the distance between exponential H and exponential K with respect to this metric is bigger than the distance between H and K in the Frobenius norm, and so on. So I don't want to give you too much, but just to tell you that this is a fundamental property which tells us that this manifold has negative curvature. And in Hilbert spaces there is this parallelogram law which is written here. So I write it like a inequality for a triangle. So I have a triangle CAB, M is the midpoint of that, so that means 1/2 of A plus B. Then the parallelogram law, or the Apollonius theorem, is that the norm A minus C square plus norm B minus C square is 2 times norm M minus C square plus norm M minus A square. In this geometry, because of this, it becomes an inequality which we call the semi-parallelogram law. So this is a space of non-positive curvature. I just want to emphasize, not to show you too many things, that in the literature you will see this is an NPC space or Brouwer-Tit space and all that. They are very simple matrix inequalities. That is, so any space in which the metric satisfies this inequality is said to be an NPC space. So it's just a name for this kind of thing. So this is a very concrete model. Now here is something very interesting, and that's the crux of the matter. Given two matrices A and B, in this geometry there is a unique path of minimal length joining them. That there is a unique geodesic which I have written in front of you, that I'm denoting it as A sharp sub T B. The equation of that turns out to be, you first take A minus 1/2 B A minus 1/2 to the power T, and then again put A half on either side. So the geodesic joining A and B is parameterized in a natural way like this. And again the proof is quite simple. If you see, if you do differential geometry, it may be different arguments. If you do matrix theory, then the argument is very simple. I have already noticed that this metric is invariant under congruences. So I make one of the matrices identity. So I apply a congruence, and the pair AB becomes I A minus half B A minus 1/2. Then the most natural way of going from one to the other is just take the tth power of this. So when t is equal to 0, you are at identity. When t is equal to 1, you are at this and then undo what I have done here. So that's how you get this equation. Now something very interesting you see here. When I put t is equal to 1/2, I get that Push-Voronovich formula for the geometric mean. So here is something very remarkable, that any two positive definite matrices can be joined by a unique geodesic, and that weird looking thing which we call the geometric mean is exactly the midpoint of that. So that's quite remarkable. It links now with a different subject, geometry. So now it suggests that if I want to have a geometric mean of more than two matrices, so if for 2 it's the center of the path joining them, then for 3 it should be the center of the triangle spanned by those, except you have to make sense of that. That may or may not make sense. So the geometric mean of M matrices A1, A2, AM should be the center of the convex span of A1, A2, AM in that space. And one has to make good sense of that. Okay, so this is my definition now. The center of mass, barycenter, or the geometric mean of A1, A2, AM. So that's just the Gaussian least squares mean. So you look at any point x, then look at the square of the distance from x to AJ, except the distance is measured in this metric. Sum up these and take the minimum. If these were numbers or if these were vectors in a Hilbert space, you will just get the arithmetic mean x1 plus x2 plus xm over m. Here the distance has been changed, otherwise it's the same thing. So that is what I define as the geometric mean. Of course, now you have to first make sure that such a minimum exists. That was done by Elie Cartan long ago. Such a minimum exists in any space of non-positive curvature. So I should emphasize what's the role of non-positive curvature. If you take, for example, the sphere, that's a manifold of positive curvature. So if I take any 2 points, if I have the North Pole and the South Pole, then there is no unique geodesic. So there are several possible contenders for the midpoint. Other than that, if I am less in an arc of length less than pi, I can do it. But if you have more than 2, then the problem becomes more complicated, so you have to put certain restrictions. Fortunately, in a manifold of negative curvature, no restriction is needed. So if you have any m points, there is a unique center. So this was proposed around 2004, 2005 by some of us. So some properties are, so I repeat, I wanted a geometric mean of M matrices, and I have given this as a candidate. So some properties which we want are obvious from the definition itself. It's symmetric in the M variables. As I said, the metric is invariant under congruence transformations. So if I apply x star dot x to all the M matrices, then the geometric mean also picks up that. So this very important property is automatically satisfied. I also told you that the mean, the metric is invariant under inversion. So the geometric mean of A1 inverse, A2 inverse, AM inverse is the inverse of the geometric mean of A1, A2, AM. So some very nice properties come for free.
So for 2 matrices, the A sharp P.
Yes, so now you will soon see that for 2 matrices there is no choice. Once I had congruence invariance, then that A sharp B is the only solution. Here we have several that I have not yet said, but surely for 2 it reduces to that. Okay. Now, okay, I must say that at this point, that people working in certain applications, especially image processing, radar data, NMR mapping of the brain, they had already chosen this as the mean with which they were working. For reasons not quite explained, at least not to me, except they had not linked it with other subjects. So coming from matrix theory or operator theory, for us this property is very crucial. We want it to be monotone. That is, if I increase one of the matrices, then the geometric mean should also go up in this with respect to this order. Now that we were unable to prove till recently. Then we want certain other properties. Every mean should be a concave function, like geometric mean is concave in the arguments. So now all those are operator theory properties. Then something about its norm, something about its determinant. So although differential geometers have studied this manifold for nearly 1 century and they had this center of mass concept, they never worried about these questions, because what is the order? So these are typical operator theory questions which an operator theorist would like to have. So that led to some other problems. So meanwhile, there were some competing definitions of geometric mean. One came from Andoh, Lee and Matthias. They gave an inductive definition. So if you know what is a geometric mean of two matrices, then they told you how to make up one of three matrices, then of four, and so on. For three matrices, their procedure boils down to the following. They did not make a connection with geometry, but in this language, that's what happens. So if you look at a triangle, you want to reach its barycenter. So in Euclidean geometry, no, it's the same thing. If you take x1 plus x2 plus x3 over 3, if you take the center of mass, if you take the three medians and then the three medians intersect in a point, that's the same point. Now in this geometry, a triangle is a fat object, so the three medians may not intersect at all. You are in higher dimensions. And there is another way of doing it. You have a triangle, you take the midpoints of the three sides, then you get another triangle. Then take the midpoint of the three sides of this new triangle, you get one more triangle. Go on doing this. Then this procedure converges, and the unique point you get in the intersection of all these is again the center of mass. Now if you try to do this on a sphere which is of positive curvature, you will not get anything. But in this manifold which is of negative curvature, one can see that the same analogous procedure, except you replace the lines by the geodesics, you will have curved triangles. It converges to a unique point, and they defined this as the geometric mean. So it turns out that it's different from the barycenter which I have defined. So Andoh, Lee, Matthias then proved 10 properties of this mean, which are quite nice, and from then on it became almost axioms that any good mean must have these 10 properties. And it turned out that if you have more than two matrices, then there are infinitely many means which have all those 10 properties. Okay? And people have been studying them, numerical schemes to do that and all that. So now for us who had given the barycenter as the definition, it became important to establish all these 10 properties. So that's the next thing which I am coming to. Now this is something which I would like to draw the attention of people here who think of minimization, optimization. There is very good problem here, except you have to get used to this Riemannian metric, and all the optimization is with respect to that. So as I understand it is that you have to approach the center of mass. How to do that? So I look at what happens in Euclidean geometry and try to imitate it here. So here is a procedure. If you have vectors, or let's take numbers a1, a2, am. Now I am going to define certain averages. So S1 is just a1. S2 is 1/2 of S1 plus A2. So that's the same thing as 1/2 of A1 plus A2. S3 is 2/3 of S2 plus 1/3 of A3, which is of course 1/3 of A1 plus A2 plus A3. Go on doing this. Then at the mth stage, you have arrived at A1 plus A2 plus AM divided by M. Can I imitate this in non-Euclidean geometry, in that Riemannian geometry, except that I will not have plus there, I will have something else. So I interpret this in this way. You start from A1, move half the distance towards A2. So this half A1 plus A2 is nothing but I have started at A1 and moved half the distance towards A2. From that point, I start moving towards A3 and go 1/3 of the distance. Then from that point I move 1/4 of the distance towards A4 and go on doing it. Then at the mth stage I have reached the barycenter. So I imitate this in this geometry, and something very interesting happens. So I have M positive definite matrices A1, A2, AM. So my capital S1 is now A1. S2 is A1 sharp half A2. That's going half the distance towards A2. S3 is now going 1/3 of the distance towards A3. Now here it will not be reasonable to expect that at the mth stage I have reached the barycenter. But maybe I keep on doing this is it true that this sequence converges to the geometric mean of A1, A2, Am? So I repeat, I have m positive definite matrices. I start from A1, go half the distance in this metric towards A2. From that point, go 1/3 of the distance towards A3. From that, 1/4 of the distance towards A4. Go on doing this. It does not converge to the barycenter, but maybe the limit you go on doing this will converge to the barycenter. So something even more interesting than that happens.
What does it mean you go on after you've done the command?
Because I have not reached anywhere. So
No, but you said, what is the limit? What do you understand?
yeah, you will just see. So I again come back and okay. So here are say 4 points. So say this is A1, A2, A3, A4. So I come half the way here, then go 1/3 of the way here, then go 1/4 of the thing here, then now, then 1/5 of the way now. I go on doing this, and 1/6 of the way, and so on. So keep on doing this. Okay, so now here the breakthrough came from some other direction. People have been studying probability theory, center limit theorems on manifolds of negative curvature. So two people working in this area, Lawson and Lim, they extracted the argument from there. So here is what you do. So you have these m indices, 1, 2 up to m. Pick up any of these indices with equal probability 1 upon m. Call that I1. Repeat. Next one is I2 and so on. So you get a sequence I1, I2, I3, etc. whose terms are chosen from 1 to m with equal probability. Given this sequence, I make up this asymmetric average SKIA. So I is this sequence, A is this m tuple. So S1 is AI1, S2 is going from S1 half the distance towards AI2. From that point go 1/3 of the distance towards AI3 and go on doing this. So it is not what I drew there, but a randomized version of that. Then the theorem proved by Sturm in more general setup, measures on non-positive curvature spaces, says that this sequence converges to the barycenter of A1, A2, Am. Okay. So I repeat, I expected that kind of process to converge. So for Euclidean geometry, it stops at the mth step. For this geometry, I expected maybe it doesn't stop at the mth step, but you can continue. But what happens is, or what's the first step here in the understanding, that you randomize this, and then you can see that for almost all sequences, this convergence takes place. Okay. Now, what is the importance of this for our problem? We were interested in proving that the geometric mean is monotone. If you have two matrices, that is well known. That's one of the properties. For more than two, I do not know. However, this procedure constructs or converges to this mean by taking averages, which in turn are geometric means taken of things two at a time. You see, that's what I want to emphasize. So here I have taken the mean of AI1 and AI2. At the next step, I take the mean of this thing with AI3 and so on. So since the mean of two matrices is known to be monotone, at each stage there is monotonicity. And what is the importance of this almost all I? For the tuple A1, A2, Am, it may be one word, and for tuple B1, B2, Bm, it may be another word. But since for both the convergence takes place for almost all such sequences, there would be a common word for which the convergence will take place. So the intersection of two sets of measure 1 is again a set of measure 1. So that was the proof given by Lawson and Lim, and when we saw this, we had two problems with it. There is a black box. I assume this big theorem on probability in non-positive curvature spaces, and then I pick it up and use it here. We were not happy. And maybe it's too strong. I just need one common word for which this should happen. So we tried to, okay, so before that, I have just said what is written here, that the sequence of binary means, so given two tuples, there is a common one, and at each stage there is monotonicity, so it's carried over. I have just said this. Okay. So we were not happy because there is a black box, this probability theory on manifolds of negative curvature, which we had to assume. So can we simplify the proof and give a thing which is more palatable with simple matrix inequalities? That can be done. So the first thing I want to point out that for this consequence, we need only that there is some index set such that the limit of SKIA is the geometric mean of A1, A2, AM, and for the same set I, when you do it to the tuple B1, B2, Bm, you get the geometric mean. So as I said, for this we do not need that the convergence should take place on a set of measure 1. It's enough if the convergence takes place on a set of measure bigger than half, because the intersection of two sets with measure bigger than half is non-trivial. So that's all we need. So in effect, instead of a strong law of large numbers, it's enough to have a weak law, and fortunately this can be achieved by very simple matrix inequalities like EMI and others which I mentioned earlier. So now I try to explain some ideas, and this is important again for this audience. So for the geometric mean of A1 and A2, I gave you an explicit formula. For the mean of A1, A2, AM, I have only told you it's the solution of a minimization problem. No explicit formula is known so far, except this thing, that this x, which I am calling the geometric mean, is the unique solution of this equation. So you take log of aj to the power minus 1/2 x, aj to the power minus 1/2, sum up these and put the sum equal to 0. Then this equation has a unique solution, which is the geometric mean. Now again, so that it doesn't look mysterious, let's see what it would do if these were numbers. So if these were numbers, so look at this aj minus half, aj minus half, that I have put as aj in the denominator, and then you have, instead of x, I am putting the geometric mean, so that is a1, a2, am, then the mth root. If you take the log of that and then add up these things, this is just the log of this product, which is log of 1, which is 0. So the geometric mean is of numbers is solution of this equation. For matrices you have to be careful where to put x on the left or on the right, all that, but you can play with it and then come to this. So the geometric mean is the solution of this, what I call the log equation, that is summation log aj minus 1/2 x aj minus 1/2 is equal to 0. So one uses that. Then this exponential metric increasing property, which I told you, the distance between EH and EK is bigger than the distance between H and K. So these are standard inequalities. And then the crucial thing is we prove a multivariable semi-parallelogram law. That is, you have M, you can think of it either as a variance inequality or a semi-parallelogram law. So the semi-parallelogram law is written here. Take any point C, take the distance of that from the midpoint of A and B, then delta 2 square, it's less than or equal to such a sum. Now I have M matrices, the geometric mean is G, and instead of C I put again the same, anything C, you have an inequality which is just extension of this. So these are simple matrix inequalities, and then using that we can prove instead of something happening with probability 1, something happening with high probability. So let me spend 2 minutes on this. So Sturm's theorem was, you look at infinite sequences with terms coming out of 1 to m. Then we made up this asymmetric averages sequence, ai1 sharp 1/2 ai2, then with that sharp 1/3 ai3, etc. And the theorem was that for almost all I, this converges to the geometric mean. Now instead of that, we do the following. So I believe this probabilistic method, as it's called, uses this kind of argument very often. So instead of making up an infinite sequence, I make a finite sequence. So given I make this n tuple j1, j2, jn, whose terms are coming from the index set 1 to m, then I make the same kind of asymmetric average, then I have this inequality, which says on an average the distance from the barycenter of these Sn, so I am summing up over all such sequences and then dividing by the cardinality. So on an average the distance of these things from the geometric mean is bounded by something like 1 over n times a constant depending on the tuple A. Okay? So that's what I've said here in words. On an average, the square of the distance of these averages from G is smaller than 1 over n times alpha A. So now, if you give me any epsilon and I make this 1 over n alpha smaller than epsilon over 3, since on an average the distance is smaller than this, then there can be only 1/3 of the summands for which it is bigger than this epsilon. So the average of something is smaller than epsilon over 3. So that's a simple counting argument that only 1/3 of the summands can have values bigger than epsilon. So how does it work for me? So I'm given two tuples a1, a2, am, a1 prime, a2 prime, am prime. Let G and G prime be their geometric means, alpha, alpha prime defined above. Make both these things smaller than epsilon over 3. So choose n large enough such that this is smaller than epsilon over 3. This is smaller than epsilon over 3. Then use this corollary which says that for at least 2/3 of the indices, this will be less than epsilon over 3, and again for at least 2/3 of them, this will be less than epsilon over 3. So there will be a common point where both are smaller than that. And then it reduces to taking means 2 at a time. So the crux of the matter is that I am realizing it as a limit of geometric means taken 2 at a time. So that's the crucial point. Of course, it gives us a new understanding of how to reach the barycenter in this geometry. So once we had this, then I raised this question which is sort of facetiously phrased. Does G really play dice? I mean, why should probability enter this setup at all? So in other words, why should not the most natural word work? That is, instead of picking up things at random, I just start like I did in that picture. That is, I have M matrices, so I start with A1, go half the distance towards A2, then from there 1/3 of the distance, and I go on doing this. So after the M cycle is complete, then I'll repeat. So instead of a random walk, I'm going to make a deterministic walk, so to say. And why should that not converge to G? And the answer is it does. So, but the proofs known right now are a little dirty. So I hope somebody here gets interested in this. And the idea is, as I told you, that this geometric mean is the solution of this log equation. So first of all, geometric mean is the minimizer of this thing. It's a convex function, so you can use ideas from convex analysis. So to show that sequence goes to G, because this is a convex function, it's enough to show that f of yn goes to fg, and then you bring in the log equation and somehow solve this. Now here is another approach. Again, I'll try to simplify it, explaining what happens in the case of numbers. So as I told you, if you have m numbers a1, a2, am, look at a1 to the power t plus a2 to the power t plus am to the power t, divide by m, and then take the power 1 upon t. Call that xt. So as I told you, if you take the limit of this thing as t goes to 0, you do get the usual geometric mean of numbers. Now seeking inspiration from here, for matrices this does not go to the barycenter, but I try to imitate this, or I shouldn't say I try to imitate this, these two people, Lim and Palfia, perhaps had this in mind. So they came up with this very nice argument. You look at the equation, x is equal to 1 upon m summation x to the power 1 minus t aj to the power t. Now this is silly because I can just take out this x to the power 1 minus t on the left, then you get x to the power t is equal to average of summation of aj to the power t, and that just means x is equal to this. But now I imitate this. Instead of this, I write that in that geometry. So I look at this equation, capital X is equal to 1 upon m summation x sharp t aj. So this is the mean of x and aj. Then one proves that this has a unique solution. call that xt, and now you differentiate that equation. So the point is, if you have x to the power t and minus 1 over t as limit t goes to 0, you get log. So starting with this, you solve that equation, and the geometric mean is the solution of this log equation, but limit of x to the power t minus 1 over t is log t. So one can show that this converges also to the geometric mean. So again, the point is, this is made from two matrices at a time, so many of the properties are inherited. Okay, now let me tell you some other interesting properties of this barycenter. So as I said, the geometers who have studied this have never worried about these properties, but here they are important. If I take, so remember now, this G is the geometric mean as defined by us, barycenter. The determinant of that is the geometric mean of the determinants of the arguments. So that's very nice property, especially people working in NMR brain mapping. They tell us that the determinant represents the volume of water in some tissue in the brain, and they are having various scans and they want to match them. So they want the determinant of the geometric mean to be the average. So arithmetic mean doesn't have that property. So determinant of a plus b over 2 is not the average of the determinants, but this one has that property. Then in quantum mechanics, positive unital linear maps are important. So if you apply a positive unital linear map phi to the geometric mean, then that is smaller than the geometric mean of phi a1, phi a2, phi am. That's of importance in some other subject. But in the previous talk, speaker mentioned unitarily invariant norms. So here it is. If you take any norm, Frobenius norm, spectral norm, any unitarily invariant norm of the geometric mean of a1, a2, am. So remember, this is a matrix. Then the norm is less than or equal to the geometric mean of the norms of a1, a2, am. So these are very nice properties which are useful in different subjects. Okay, so here are my conclusions. So I said that for us the problem was that how to define a good geometric mean for more than two positive matrices. So we got this barycenter. There are other candidates, and now each subject has its own demands about what the mean should fulfill. So people in elasticity, they want that it should have a certain nice behavior with respect to inversion. People in medical science, they want something to do to determinants and so on. For us, the important thing was it should be monotone. And so because of that obsession, now we have found 3 or 4 different ways of defining the same object. So this, as I said, this is very important in classical differential geometry. So, but that is just given as the solution of that minimization problem, barycenter. Now we have 2 or 3 different ways of reaching that point, and people have written numerical schemes to converge to that and so on. So for operator theory people, monotonicity, concavity, eigenvalues, norms, these are very interesting. So because of that, many things have come together. So as you saw, there is some differential geometry, some functional analysis, some probability, and I believe there are lots of applications, including, I am told, in machine learning, because kernels which people are using are positive definite matrices. So if you have to average those kernels for whatever reason, which I don't know, maybe this is one possibility too. Thank you. So.
Can you control the geometric mean by the arithmetic mean?
Yeah, it's so that the inequality which you expect, that is right. I mean, control in this sense that, so geometric mean of a1, a2, am is less than or equal to.
Right, but is it to be shown?
Yeah, this is true.
You didn't show it.
I didn't show it, but this is true.
Is it easy to show?
Easily, well, if you take this theorem, then it's easy because at each step that inequality is true, for example. Okay, so this is true what I wrote here. So what I wrote earlier was, if you just take geometric mean of A and B, then that's less than or equal to a plus b over 2. This is also true if I take the T geometric mean, as I call A sharp TB, then that is less than or equal to 1 minus T A plus TB. Okay, so here you are moving along this geodesic. At time t you have reached here, and here you are moving along the straight line. So at each stage this is true. So using this, for example, you can prove that. There may be simpler proofs, I don't remember right now. Yeah, but all the nice things are true. Okay.
Is there any reasonable sequence you know for which it fails? I mean, of course, you can make a sequences which don't use one another.
Yeah, I mean, trivially, if I keep on A1, yeah, or A1, A2, I keep on doing that and ignore the others. But if you write anything, as I said, with probability 1, it will convert, you know. Yeah, so it's, except if you do like this, just ignore one of the indices. So, yeah. So the problem, interesting problem, as far as I can see, is just to prove somehow. So Holbrook has proved that, but the proof is sort of not a very clean proof. So I think this is an interesting question. We want to reach the center of this set, and how to do it. I mean, there may be other ways of doing it. Yeah.
So, you know, several people in machine learning are interested in low rank matrices, and I think we had a little discussion yesterday.
Yeah.
What if you have these matrices to be
Okay, so now this, yeah. This idea has been pursued in other directions. So for example, the people doing radar data processing, they have this constraint that their matrices are not just positive definite, they are also tuplets. Okay, so roughly as I understand it, I have not understood this one crucial step of how they are going from the physics to this matrices, but roughly speaking, what they tell me is that you are throwing beams and they are coming back at you, you stack them as correlation matrices, which are positive definite. And then you have to smoothen the data, which means to average it, and somehow they think this is the right average. Clustering, they are doing something similar. They want to replace some K matrices by their average, and again they claim this is the right average. Why, that I do not know. But in this radar data, because of this time series nature, the matrices are not just positive definite, they are also tuplets. So now they want a mean which will also be tuplets. This procedure does not give you a tuplets matrix. If you have your arguments to be tuplets matrices, so the way they have attacked this problem is again imitating this. They have changed the metric. So on the space of positive definite tuplets matrices, they have written some other metric, and then they minimize with respect to that. So they are doing that. For a mathematician, now if you all my matrices were positive definite. So our solution to matrices being positive semi-definite was very naive. We just said if you have a singular, just I add a plus epsilon I, then that becomes non-singular, do it, and then at the end take limit epsilon goes to 0. This, according to people, is not a good thing, because there are situations where you have rank K matrices and you want the mean also to have rank K. So for example, if you do this, if you have two projections P and Q, then it turns out that the geometric mean is the projection on the intersection of P and Q. So if they were disjoint, which is very nice from the point of view of a mathematician, you're just getting the natural thing. But if these were disjoint, then if these were two rank K projections which are disjoint, then the geometric mean is 0. That's not what they want. So again, they have looked at the space of rank K matrices, made it into some kind of manifold, embedding it into Grassmannian and Stiefel manifold and all that. Given some Riemannian metric, solved this, and that's what they're calling the geometric mean. Okay, so
do those satisfy the 10 properties?
no, 10 properties will not be there, because some are, for example, determinant is 0 in any case. So you have to drop some of them, but the rest, whatever remains, they seem to have. They seem to have, yes. So there's Bonnabel and others, so, you know, so yeah.
Okay, thank you.